You have to actually opt out of new regime to go back to the old regime. So in old regime, you used to get so many deductions, so your taxable income was lower, right? So you ended up paying low tax.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Cut the Noise. Today we have Ankit Dukania with us, finance head at Grip Invest. Welcome to the show, Ankit.
Thanks, Amit. I'm very happy to be here.
So Ankit, today we'll be talking about new and the old tax regime. A lot of buzz is there around this topic because the financial year is about to end, first thing. And the other thing is it's there in the market in our taxation system, but still people are confused about what is new and what is old.
Sure. So you're right. It's a buzzword today, and that's mainly because of your employers would have asked you to select a particular tax regime. I'll start with the basics. What is the old regime and what is the new regime? So old regime is nothing but what we used to follow till now. In 2020, budget 2020, which started from 2021, government introduced a new scheme which they called new tax scheme.
Okay.
So the idea was that they wanted to simplify the tax for an individual and HUFs.
As you explained, Ankit, that this was released in 2020. So why there was a need to introduce the new tax regime?
So I think major reason, two reasons. One is the focus of this government is on more governance, right? So they want to simplify. Second is from an investor or an individual perspective, the old regime was becoming too complex. There were a lot of deductions, and those deductions were conditional upon certain conditions to be fulfilled. So government said, okay, let me simplify this for you, and we'll do away with all the deductions, and I'll reduce your tax percentages.
The slabs, basically. So, Ankit, obviously there are differences in new and old tax regime. There are differences in tax slabs, as you mentioned. But from, let's say in layman terms, what are the key advantages or let's say disadvantages of new and old, and who should opt for what?
In the existing system, in the existing regime that we used to follow, is there is a tax salary income. Then you get certain deductions. For example, for HRA, if you have paid rent, you get HRA deduction. If you have donated to a NGO or to political party, you get a deduction of that amount as well. There are similarly various other deductions. There are close to 70 deductions that an individual can claim. Then you arrive at the total taxable income and you pay the tax on that basis whatever slab you fit in.
Correct.
10%, 20%, 30%. Now in the new regime, all these deductions are done away with. The only deduction that is allowed is a standard deduction of 50,000 rupees flat.
Okay.
So whatever your income is, salary income is, you deduct 50,000 out of that and you pay tax on it.
Okay.
Now, what is the benefit of new regime versus old regime? So in old regime, you used to get so many deductions, so your taxable income was lower, right? So you ended up paying low tax.
Okay.
Correct? In the new regime, to match it to new regime or to make it even better, so they have created a new slab which is comparatively lower than the existing slab.
Okay.
So that's how, if one need to be very careful of choosing, they want to be in the old regime or in the new regime.
So as you mentioned, if someone is going for the new tax regime, so they don't have to either care for the deductions to be filled in the ITR, let's say, or the income tax declaration when you do in your office. These other details are not required in that, is it?
That's right. Because all those deductions have been gone away with in the new regime, you don't need to declare anything to either to your employer or while you are filing your ITR.
So Ankit, let's say if someone has made their mind and according to their professional condition or whatever they are into, let's say if someone wants to go for new or old, how can they do that?
Sure. So starting this year, everyone would be in default new regime.
Okay.
So if you have to actually opt out of new regime to go back to the old regime.
Okay.
Right? Now, how do you decide whether you want to go back to the old regime or you want to stay in the new regime? It depends on your income and your deductions. Typically, broadly speaking, if your deduction in the old regime was 3.5 to 4 lakh rupees, you are kind of breaking even. It doesn't matter where you are in new regime or old regime.
Okay.
But if your deduction was higher than that amount, right, then it makes sense to be in the old regime.
Okay. So that you can declare your...
So that you can declare all those deductions and your tax liability comes down.
Okay.
Your employer would ask you to choose, right? And let's say you have chosen new regime, but you still have an option to choose new regime while you're filing your ITR. So what matters is when you're filing your ITR in June, July, right? That is the choice which matters.
Okay, so it doesn't matter when you're declaring your IT.
It doesn't. The only difference that would make is that at that time you might have a tax liability or a tax refund because your employer has deduction basis your declaration. Let's say you declared old regime and you provided all the deduction proofs, right? Now you have a change of heart, and at the time of filing your return, you chose to go into the new regime, right? The only difference it would make, you can still do that, but the only difference it would make is there might be a tax liability difference that you will either have to pay or you will get back
As a refund.
as a refund.
Okay, understood.
Once you have chosen it in your ITR that you want to be in the new or old regime, you cannot go back.
So, Ankit, for the audience, what would be your suggestion for selecting a new tax regime or going for an old one?
See, it totally depends on their income levels and the deductions they have. But someone starting off their professional career, I would believe that new tax regime would make sense to them because that would result in lower tax.
Okay.
One flip side to that is that under the old regime, there were deduction under 80C, so which actually forced you to make certain investments, for example, in mutual funds, or forced you to take life insurance, for example. Now, under new regime, you're not forced to do that. So that means more money in hand, but that also means you're not saving for your retirement,
Okay.
right? So that is something I would like all our audience to take care while they decide which regime to follow.
Thank you so much, Ankit, for this insightful session. I hope you guys loved this session and got a lot of information about the old and new tax regime. Still, if you guys have questions, you can actually put down in the comment section and we'll be happy to answer them. If you like this video, go hit the like button and please subscribe to the channel, which is Grip Invest. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.
Investments in debt securities are subject to risks. Read all the offer related documents carefully.